this is Kathy Washer, and I want to welcome you to Story Time. Today we have a really good story to share with you. It's called Thank You, Amu. And I want you to look at the picture and see if you can guess why it might be called Thank You, Amu. The story is about a woman named Amu, and the author, I'll show you a picture of the author. Actually, she's the author. She wrote the book, and she drew the picture. She's the illustrator. And her name is Oge Mora, and you can see a picture of her there. And she wrote this story in memory of her grandmother because it reminded her of spending time cooking in the kitchen with her grandmother. And she used to call her grandmother Amu. Even though it means queen in her Nigerian language, she sees it as grandma. I had a name for my grandmother too, as Nani. And when I saw this book and saw that it was about a woman, her grandmother, making a stew, I thought, maybe I'll try making the stew that my grandmother used to make. And when I say try, I mean try because I haven't made it before today. So I'm giving it a try. My stew is called hoodish. That's a funny word. See if you can say it. Hoodish. And this woman, Amu, is making a stew. So I got mine started. Before we start the book, I want to show you what I put in so far. I put in onion, green bell pepper, and if you can see over here on this side, some mushrooms, and those are in my pot cooking. And now I'm going to add the meat that I cooked. It took an hour to cook the meat to get it nice and tender, and I'm pouring it in the pot. I'm going to add some tomato sauce, a whole can. I'm going to add a little bit of salt. I'm going to add a little bit of pepper. I'm going to be careful with the pepper not to put too much. And I'm going to add some paprika. But I like paprika, so I'm going to add a lot. Stirs in my big pot here to make my stew. Stew is like soup, except it has chunkier vegetables and meat in it. Not as much liquid as a stew. On the corner, First Street and Long Street, on the very top floor, Amu was cooking a thick red stew in a big fat pot for a nice evening meal. She seasoned and stirred it and took a small taste. What a delicious stew, Amu said. Tonight's dinner will surely be the best I have had. There's a picture of her with her stew. With that, Amu put down her spoon and went to read a book before supper. As the thick red stew simmered on the stove, can you hear my stew simmering? Maybe you can't hear that. Its scrumptious scent wafted out the window and out the door, down the hall, toward the street, and around the block until someone was at the door. When Amu opened it, she saw, look at the picture, it might give you a hint who's knocking at the door. A little boy. Little boy, Amu explained, what brings you to my home? I was playing with my race car down the hall when I smelled the most delicious smell, the little boy replied. What is it? Thick red stew. Stew, he sighed. That sure sounds yummy. Amu thought for a moment. She was saving her stew for dinner, but she had made quite a bit. It would not hurt to share. Would you like some? The little boy nodded. And so Amu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. Thank you, Amu, the little boy said, and went on his way. I'm going to take this cover off. With that, Amu closed the door and went back to her book. As she read, her thick red stew's scrumptious scent wafted out the window and out the door, down the hall, toward the street, and around the block until someone was at the door. When Amu opened the door, this time she saw, see if you might guess who's at the door this time. A police officer. Miss Police Officer, Amu explained, what brings you to my home? I was on duty down the street when I smelled the most delicious smell, Miss Police Officer replied. What is it? Thick red stew. Oh, stew, she said, and her mouth watered. That sounds mighty tasty. Amu thought for a moment. There was still enough to share. Would you like some? The police officer nodded. Once again, Amu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. Thank you, Amu, the officer said, and went on her way. And so for the second time, Amu closed the door and went back to her book. Sure enough, as she read, her thick red stew's scrumptious scent wafted out the window and out the door, down the hall, toward the street, and around the block until knock, knock, knock. Again, someone was at Amu's door. This time when she opened it, she saw, might be a clue here on who's at the door this time. A hot dog vendor. Mr. Hot Dog Vendor, Amu explained, what brings you to my home? I was selling my hot dogs down the block when I smelled the most delicious smell. Mr. Hot Dog Vendor replied, what is it? Thick red stew. Ooh, stew, the vendor licked his lips. That sounds quite delectable. What do you think she's gonna do? So Amu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. Thank you, Amu, the hot dog vendor said, and went on his way. Throughout the day, people from all across the neighborhood knocked on Amu's door. She fed a shop owner, a cab driver, a doctor, an actor, a lawyer, a dancer, a baker, an artist, a singer, an athlete, a bus driver, a construction worker. Even the mayor stopped by. And each time they knocked, Amu shared. Soon, the sky darkened, the streetlights brightened, and it was finally time for dinner. But when Amu opened her big fat pot of thick red stew for her nice evening meal, it was empty. Amu sniffled. There goes the best dinner I ever had. Sorry and blue, she sat at the table with her empty pot until knock, 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 knock. Who could that be? Amu wondered. When she opened her door, she saw the little boy, the police officer, the hot dog vendor, the shop owner, the cab driver, the doctor, the actor, the lawyer, the dancer, the baker. Why, everyone she fed today was at her door. I'm sorry, everyone, Amu sighed. My thick red stew is all gone. I have nothing left to share. The little boy tugged at Amu's sleeve. Don't worry, Amu. We are not here to ask. We are here to give. The police officer carried in a fresh salad. The mayor entered with a roast chicken. The baker brought a collection of sweet goodies. Even the little boy presented Amu with something special in a shiny red envelope. Everyone who had knocked on Amu's door that day squeezed inside her tiny apartment, and together they ate, danced, and celebrated. While Amu's big fat pot of thick red stew was empty, her heart was full of happiness and love. That dinner was the best she had ever had. And there's the note from the little boy inside the red envelope. thank you, Amu. And that's the story for today. A nice story for sharing, especially around Thanksgiving and holiday time. Whatever we have, it's fun to share. I'm gonna have, uh-oh.
Dr.
Who
Washer?
is it?
What is
What
that?
smells so delicious?
It smells really good.
Dr.
Fantastic.
Solly, Mr. Young are here. Would you like some of my
Ooh.
thick red stew?
I
We
would
thought you
love
never
some.
asked.
I'd be happy to share.
Awesome.
Ready for you, son.
Thanks.
It looks and smells delicious.
Oh, I'm so glad. There's plenty. Thank you for joining us for story time. We'll see you next time.